we do have their name. How we're, so is that we have their name, but it's not being entered on the template? And I'm really not tracking that. So how did that seem inconsistent with the other parts of it?
Okay, who can answer that? I just took this from the questionnaire, screenshot from the questionnaire. Patty, do you have some insight on that?
Yes, that is a good point. This language might be left over from our initial plan to not collect the name. I will check on our ability to remove this.
Yeah, it seems like that's right. Okay, just wanted to seem inconsistent. Thanks.
Yes, good point. Thanks.
Great, Gary. Thank you. Any other questions about the consent forms?
Actually, I had one other question, not about the consent, but going up to a higher level. When we had the roster, I'm not sure how we've dealt with it, but so suppose there are 10 people on the cab and only 8 show up. I think we still want to, and maybe it's down, obvious down below, we still want to follow up with people that didn't show up because even though they didn't attend the cab, it seems like they could still be doing activities in the cab meetings, right? Arnie, isn't that right? Don't we want to track those guys? I don't remember what the rest of the shows, but anyway, I want to throw that out as kind of a question maybe return to.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying, Gary.
There's a point if people are on the phone or whatever, you know, so 8 of the 10 people on the cab come to a particular meeting, but 2 people are not at the meeting. It wasn't clear to me whether we were asking people to go and contact the other two people on the cab who did not attend the meeting. I think we want to contact those people because they in fact have some valuable information. This wasn't clear to me what the instructions above were, whether we were contacting those people who did not attend also. Jimmy?
That is correct. We want to reach out to those that were not at the meeting.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Okay.
So we'll see that.
That's important.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Thanks. Go on. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so that's helpful. So I think when we go through the questions, a lot of the questions seem to ask people about their attendance at the meeting. So I'm not sure if there's a path for talking to people who aren't at the meeting.
So here's the thing. If they did not attend the meeting, the way it's structured is the next time they attend a meeting, that all gets handled pretty well. So if someone is completely absent from a meeting and you for some reason suspect they were invited and could have, should have been there, the way it's structured now, you do not need to reach out to them.
Okay, well that was the clarification I was looking for. So right. Okay.
Okay. So we're only going to interview people who attend the meeting when they attend the meeting.
Yep.
Correct. And past meetings they missed are just reconstructed in the instrument the way we've written it.
Okay.
Thanks for the clarification.
Great.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes, thanks. So we have a question from Brenda in the chat, Melissa.
Okay.
And it says, will the verbal consent be obtained at each meeting? How about for those who have previously given consent?
I will defer to Patty or Stephen.
Yeah, so at this point, it's my understanding that we will provide the consent at each meeting.
Okay.
And by provide consent, you mean ask consent at each meeting?
Right, like read the details that are on the screen right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and why is that? Why consent once have to?
Is that because no one's tracking a database of who's consented at this point?
Yes. So as we get past the first round of data collection, it could be that we're able to, build up more of a record of who we're interviewing and have that information. But at this point, I think we'll have to check with what's been submitted to the IRB and the plans that we have described. And we may be able to refine those procedures as we move forward.
Okay, yeah, hopefully, and because these actually don't necessarily occur monthly, with some do, but we have time to refine those and hopefully eliminate that step. But I hear what you're saying right now. Okay.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Patty, anything else in the chat?
Nope.
Okay, great. Moving on. So the equipment that you're going to need or materials that you'll need to attend the meetings, you'll need to take your laptop computer and you'll need internet access. So you'll have to determine if you need a password or anything for that internet access. Ask the CAB administrator as a start. I'm not sure where these meetings are located, so just be prepared to do that because these surveys are submitted electronically. Also,
Melissa, could I pause you? So
absolutely.
From what we know, is this realistic that folks can get on Wi-Fi at the meetings, Gary or Arnie?
I think that's going to depend on each location. I think it's certainly possible.
And if there is not Wi-Fi, Patty?
Yeah, what happens then?
Can folks use?
We can use a mobile device.
It's what I would do if you guys are comfortable with it.
What was the option if we don't have Wi-Fi? I'm sorry, I missed it.
To use your mobile device and your data to make a hotspot.
Okay, is the instrument accessible on their mobile device?
Yes.
So they can just do it over their cell phone?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not as optimal. Just, depending on the device, sometimes the display is not as optimal. So I think a computer would be preferred, but I guess that is a good point, Melissa, that could be a backup. But I'm interested in hearing from folks who will be, on the ground conducting the data collection. Would you guys be able to use your hotspot to provide connectivity if there isn't Wi-Fi available?
Did we get an answer from every state? Kentucky, what do you think?
I anticipate that we'll have Wi-Fi at all of our CAB meetings because we can plan out the location to ensure in advance that it won't be an issue.
Okay, thank you.
I'm checking right now, but I believe RedCap, you can download the instrument, and then when you go back online, it will just upload all the information. I don't think it's required, but I'm just checking that right now.
Yeah, that's another option. So that's a good one. Looks like Kristen Harlow said Ohio's CAB has internet. Joey or Laura, New York. Anyone know about New York?
Oh, interesting. Okay, so Ohio's next meeting is a webinar.
Okay. Okay.
So Joey, what's the situation in New York?
I believe that our CAB location does have internet.
Okay. Thanks.
And Massachusetts? Anyone know about Massachusetts? Yeah.
Mom says that the next meeting in Massachusetts is a phone call.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Melissa.
Great, thank you. Good discussions. Okay. Also, the list of expected attendees or the roster I keep referring to, you'd want to take that with you. There's a possibility an information sheet will be provided in the future, but that is not something that you would have now. Just wanted to let you know that may be something coming. Paper copies of the informed consent if the respondent wants a copy of it. most do not, but have something to offer to them if they want it. And the sign-in sheet that I referred to, if you want to pass that around to get the names of the attendees and a placeholder to record their telephone number. So this is really all you would need to take with you to the meetings. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Patty, who is going to start talking about the instrument in detail, and Stephen.
Sure, thanks. So we've been thinking a lot about tracking respondents. As you know, you will be collecting the data at each CAB meeting, and so it stands to reason that you'll be re-interviewing the same people time after time. At this point in our instrument development and systems development, we don't have a way to track respondents from, the first time they're interviewed to the next time. It's something that we are in discussions to build and to think carefully about how that structure would work. But for right now, there's not something in place. So each survey will begin just with a survey link to the web REDCap instrument. So each survey will be hosted at your site. So Ohio will host its own, Kentucky will host their own, and so on. So each state will have their own link to the survey that they will share with you once everything is set up within a site. Every link is the same. So we don't have a link for Ohio CAB number 1 member and Ohio CAB number 2 member. So the best way that we're going to identify who is completing the survey from wave to wave is by name. So the name of the respondent is really a very vital piece of data because that's what we're going to use to figure out each person's responses from wave to wave. So we have a question in the survey that says, what is your name? And that is, a pretty important step for entering that. So I think there's some more details on the next slide. So when you enter the person's name, we ask that you compare their name against the name on the roster. So you'll have a roster or a sign-in sheet, and we want to make sure that we're entering this name the same way each time. So for instance, if you enter Patty one wave and then Patricia the next wave, that could create unnecessary confusion and uncertainty that we're talking to the same person. So you'll want to make sure that you validate the name against the official roster if that's available. Enter the name the same way it's listed on the roster and enter the name the same way each time. You can confirm the spelling with the respondent to make sure that you've entered it correctly, and don't hesitate to work with them to make sure that what you've entered is accurate. So we can talk more about, how to enter this field and all the other fields as we go through the survey. But we just wanted to call to your attention how we're planning to identify respondents. And at this juncture, it's by their name in the survey. Are there any questions about that? Okay. Josh, thanks for confirming about the details of the offline data capture capability within REDCap. He says in the chat that it's within the mobile app and that we haven't tested it, but it can be used on phones or tablets, and then we'll update when it's back online. At this point, it sounds like we won't need to rely on that because of the connectivity at each of the sites or the remote nature of the meetings, but we will keep that in mind, maybe even for other data collections on this project or in case the connectivity of the sites changes. Okay, we can go to the next slide, Melissa. Okay, so Stephen, is this your section then?
Yes.
Great.
So now I'm going to review how the survey will be administered. I might use the term research assistant interchangeably with data collector, so please keep that in mind, that I'm referring to the same role. So the data collector from each site will be, again, provided the public link to the survey. This link will be provided by the REDCap administrator from each site. The link can be found under the survey distribution tools module in the REDCap instance from each site. I've included a screenshot showing that link on the left-hand side. The survey link can be found under the public survey link tab. And this will be a direct link to the survey. So this is pretty much all the data collector needs to collect the data for each of the meetings that they attend. I've included a link to the survey hosted on RTI's REDCap instance, but each site, again, will have a unique link different from ours. So moving on to the survey itself, we've designed the collection tool essentially as two surveys, where one will collect the meeting details and the second one will collect the attendee information. If you go to the next slide, Melissa. When the data collector accesses the survey link, the research assistant will first need to complete the meeting details. This will include the date, type of meeting, name and location details for the meeting, and the number of attendees. The data collector will then assess the engagement phase that the meeting is currently in. And when you submit this form, this concludes the collection of the meeting details.
Can we go to the next slide? Looks like we're a little behind.
Oh, no, we're okay. We're okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
What are the meeting details here on?
I didn't include the screenshots of the entire survey here. Okay. So when we submit the form for the meeting details, the data collector will then be directed to the second survey, which will be used to collect the attendee information. And at this point, the research assistant will be expected to provide the informed consent we reviewed earlier for each attendee. And again, the attendee only needs to verbally agree to the informed consent before data collection can happen. Next slide. So if the attendee does not agree to the consent, then the survey is pretty much over and the attendee will be recorded as a no answer. If the attendee agrees to consent, a series of questions will appear depending on whether the attendee has attended a meeting or participated in the survey before. Once the survey is complete, whether the attendee has agreed to the consent or not, the data collector has the option to bring up a new form for a new attendee by selecting the Add Additional Attendee button. And the research assistant can also hit Submit, which signifies that the data collection is completed. If you guys hit Submit and you come across a new attendee to interview, you can simply just select Add Additional Attendee button from the survey queue, and that will resume data collection again. Any questions about that process?
Thanks, Stephen. So we've designed it so that you only have to answer the questions about the meeting each time you open the instrument. So ideally, that would be one time at the meeting. And then if you have any phone calls to make, each time you sit down to make those phone calls and reach people and complete the surveys, you'll have to fill out those details. You know, hopefully everyone will be available when you call them and you can do it in a session, but that's probably not entirely realistic. So we did it this way because we're interested in making sure that within the data, we're linking the details about the meeting itself and then having the details from the attendees about that meeting. So we've given you 2 ways to create a new form when you talk to a new person. And we will go through those as we take a look at the instrument. So does that make sense to you guys? Okay. So given that, should we take a look at the instrument itself?
I think that'd be a good idea.
Okay, great. So let me see. So Melissa, I can pull that up and share my screen. Would that make the most sense?
Yes, so I'm gonna stop my share.
Okay, great. And then I'm gonna try to accomplish this. Okay. So can you guys see the survey here?
Yes.
Great. So as Stephen said, and as we've kind of alluded to, at this point, the REDCap survey is hosted here at RTI. But once we receive IRB approval, which we will talk about after we review the questionnaire, we will share the REDCap with each of the sites, and then the sites will host it, and they will provide you with the web link to access the survey. So as you click on that web link, this is the form that appears, and this includes the instructions: research staff collect the following information once about each meeting. So you just fill this out on your own. You don't ask these questions to anybody else. So you just would start by choosing your state. You can type your name here. We ask the date of the meeting. So the REDCap defaults to today, but if you're making phone calls later, then you would adjust it to the date of the meeting. Move this over. Okay. And then we want to know how the activity was held. So our options are in-person, conference call, webinar, and you can choose all that apply. So if there was an in-person, but also people were on the phone, you would choose that. If everybody who attended was there in real time in one location, you would choose in-person. If there was some sort of video screen sharing webinar capabilities, you would choose that. We want to know where the meeting was held. So, I'll just make this up. And then you would say next page. So we want to know the address of your organization. So this would be the address of Ohio State.
So I think it's the address of the Elks Club.
Oh, the Elks Club?
Yeah.
Got it. Thanks, Gary. Okay. And then you would say the forms should adjust for format. So if you enter something that doesn't make sense as a zip code, it will let you know.
Patty, let me just note the way this is kind of set up, it's kind of like when we say address of your top respondent, where do you work, your organization title, where are you located? Okay. So
Okay.
The address of your organization.
So where you're located right now when you're doing the meeting?
No. The organization that so the Elks, so yeah, the Elks Club is location. You work for some organization. I guess we didn't, I thought we had asked that. Barney, didn't we ask the of the organization?
And not, you mean the name of the organization?
Yeah, go back one sec. What happened?
Yeah. Let me open up my version.
So this is still, these are still the questions for the research assistant. So I think we asked the CAB attendees about their organization.
So we are asking, what's the name of the location?
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha, I'm sorry. So you're right, it is more of the, I guess, back on the name of your organization. Sorry, my fault. Okay.
So I have to say, Gary, it's a little hard to hear you. So.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Can you hear me more now?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I was confused as to where we were in the process there, so I apologize for getting in the middle of it.
Okay. So where do we land? Are we entering the address of the Elks Club?
I think it's the address of, I guess it's the, and again, I apologize for being in the middle. Arnie, it's the address of the organization research assistants have, is that right?
Yes.
Yes, okay, as you were saying initially, so it was my fault.
Okay, so it would be Ohio State.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next question asks about how many people attended the meeting via in-person or phone or teleconference. So this is driven by our selections of the types of modes the meeting took place in. So we want to know how many total attended in person and then how many attended over the phone or teleconference. So if this were entirely over teleconference or webinar, then we would say, you know, nobody attended in person and everybody attended webinar. So Arnie, I'm interested in having you talk about this question. Are you able to do that?
Yeah, so first off, this is not a question of the respondents. This is you all thinking to yourself, and you certainly can talk to other individuals, I'll mention in a second, to help you decide. But what we're trying to do is label this meeting in a way that we can say what phase of the community engagement process they are in. So we have the examples for each phase here of what the latest community engagement work group has described for the phase. This is a little, it's a little different for community coalitions, so watch that when you get to those, but these really are about sort of a pre-planning phase, a doing phase. I think it would be useful to talk to if there is a CE facilitator or other key informant you're working with who might better understand what these are, that's probably useful. We also understand that there will be gray area, that these phases will overlap a little bit. I can't remember if this one, if we got it into this one, that you can put sort of a % or a write-in as to you think that a phase, it might be in between phases. Can you guys scroll down a little bit? I just want to see if we included that as an option, or is it still the check boxes for this one?
Right, so for this one, you just have to select one of the 7 phases that is on the screen.
Yeah, and that's fine. But we know there will be a measurement error around this, so select the one you think makes the most sense for what the community, for what the meeting is focused on in terms of community engagement. Any questions about that? And we can talk about it also offline separately for more detail if that would help.
Questions? Okay. So you would just select a phase that the coalition is in. And then the reason that this next button says submit is because, as Stephen was saying, this is its own form, essentially. So you are coming to the end of the questionnaire that is for you to talk about the meeting, and you're going into the respondent level questionnaire. So the respondent level questionnaire starts with the consent that we discussed earlier. You'll notice that the heading up here says attendee survey and includes the instructions for you to please complete the survey for each attendee. This can help orient you toward, you know, your task. So we have the official consent, and then this paragraph that that Wilson read earlier is just about like an introduction to the task. And then you'll have to indicate that yes, you have their verbal consent to participate, and then go to the next page. So once again, the instructions for you, research staff, will complete the following questions for each person at the CAB meeting. In our survey world, the convention of using all caps is a question for the interviewer as opposed to for the respondent. So this first survey is for you, or this first question is for you. And it says, is this the first survey that this person has completed? So to answer this, obviously the first time you go to a CAB meeting, the answer is going to be yes. But what you're going to need to do is kind of remember who you talked to last time and whether you've talked to this person before. You can use your notes and the rosters and the sign-in sheets that are part of your materials to help you with this, but you're going to want to know, have you talked to this person before? And this is an important driver of your path through the questions. So if it's their first time, they get questions that ask, you know, more generally about them and their involvement. But if it's the second time, it's a shorter interview. So we want to be sure to record this accurately. For our purposes today, I'll say yes. So here we just have some information for you that talks about CAB meetings that have occurred previously. So these are, you know, this kind of sets the stage for what's been happening since May 1st at the sites. And this is the first question for the respondent. What is your name? As we talked about here, you'll refer to the roster and make sure that you understand that you're entering this consistently. So is it Joe or Joseph, that kind of thing. Was this your first time attending a CAB meeting since the Healing Community Study began on May 1st, 2019? This is another driver of logic later in the survey. What is the best way to reach you for follow-up? And here you can gather their email addresses. Similar to what we saw with the zip code earlier, there are controls around these fields. So if you don't enter a valid email address, or if you enter with a comma instead of a period, it will tell you. We'll enter their phone number. What is your title or role in your organization? What is the name of your organization? What is your occupation? And then you'll collect the street address of their organization. And then you'll ask them, how long did you spend at the meeting today? So I'm just gonna make a note. So here this is part of the reason that we're waiting until after the meeting to do the interview, because we want to know how long they spent at the meeting. There's only a field for minutes, so you can translate any responses that come in as an hour into minutes. We're interested in knowing more about the cost of participating in the meeting. Did you incur any costs to attend this meeting? Please include things like lodging or childcare. Do not include personal car mileage. Once they say yes, we will follow up and say, what type of costs did you incur in order to attend the meeting? Select all that apply. And then you can say, because you're administering this, you could say transportation, lodging, childcare, or another type of cost. And you would select anything that comes up. So if they select other, first we're going to say, what other types of costs did you incur? And then we'll start at the top. How much did you spend on transportation to attend this meeting? Notice that in REDCap, the labels are underneath the field. So we'll say $10.50. In total, how much did you spend on lodging? In total, how much did you spend on other travel costs to attend this meeting? And this is in reference to filling out this other field here. So here, I have an option to either submit and add an additional attendee or just submit. And so at this time, I'm just going to hit submit and we'll go from there. So now those are the questions for an attendee who you indicate has attended the meeting for the first time and taken the survey for the first time. At this stage, you can add an additional attendee here from this survey queue function. I will do that now, and you'll notice that I go back to the consent. So I don't have to enter my name and the date again. I'm back at the form that is administered to the respondent. Do you guys see how that works? Okay. So if I enter the form and I use other values, for instance, this is not the first survey that this person has completed. I will also say, let's see. So a couple of other things that I want to point out are that these fields are not required. So if the person doesn't want to answer them, or if they don't know the answer to the questions, you can leave them blank. But at the same time, we want you to be careful to collect and record all of the data that are provided to you. So if you skip and, just be careful to not skip anything and get off track, because we want to make sure that we're collecting as much data as possible. We also have some additional questions that come up if the person has completed the survey before. So you'll notice that here I said, no, this is not the first survey that they've completed. And we see additional questions. So when they indicate that they have incurred costs to attend the meeting, we ask if the costs were different from the typical costs they reported to us previously.
Patty, this is Gary again. I'm sorry for interrupting. If you don't put their name, but they attended before, that we don't have a way of answers.
Wait, Gary, you broke up a little bit. Can you say that one more time?
If they've attended before, we don't add their name, then we don't have a way to link their previous answers in this way. Is that what we want?
We do. We collect their name here.
Well, I said it was not required, and that kind of thing. So we are asking him to collect. He made it sound as though we don't really have to get this. I thought the name was actually the critical connector.
Right. So let me check something here. So actually we did make name required because it is so critical to linking the information. So the other data are not required, but you have to provide a value for name.
Yep.
In response to how critical that point is.
Thanks, I feel better.
Good.
It's a really good point.
So you'll start with the name, what is your organization, how long did you spend at the meeting, but notice if they've taken the survey before, we're not asking for their organization's address or like those kinds of details, because we only really need to collect that one time. So we have built in some efficiencies for the second time that you interview the person. And then I think it might just be helpful to look at some of the additional questions that come up as you're interviewing someone a second time. So we say, we are interested in the time you spent on CE activities beyond the CAB meeting time. These questions also ask about the time spent by non-CAB members that helped with the activities. Since the last HCS CAB meeting you attended, how many total hours have you spent on community engagement activities? Please do not include time spent in the CAB meeting itself. So this field is asking about hours. Other non-CAB members, such as staff at your organization or other community stakeholders, may have helped you work on community engagement activities. Since the last meeting you attended, how many individuals worked on these activities with you during this time? So you can, you're asking them about the people they work with. Since the last meeting you attended, how many total hours did all of these individuals spend on these activities? And please think about the occupations of the individuals who spent the most time on the activities during this period. What occupation type is associated with the most time spent? Is that clear? So here, we once again have an option to submit or submit and add an additional attendee. So to demonstrate that functionality, I will press this and add an additional attendee. And as we expect, oh, I see, it won't let me go because I didn't enter a name. As we expect, we wind up back at the informed consent again. So the other combination of events that can happen is that we can say, yes, it's my first interview. We know that we have to enter the name. But you can say that this was not the first meeting that I attended since the study began. Is there a question? Okay. Feel free to chime in. So if I've attended meetings in between May 1st and the day of the interview, I will say this is not my first time that I've attended a meeting. And then we get some additional questions there. So we'll say, yes, I incurred costs, transportation. And then we have these same questions that we just went over about the hours and the occupation of folks with whom you're working. And then we have these questions. Stephen, we have to work on these fills, huh?
So those fills should have populated. Let me look at what's going on, but it should be already hard coded into the survey.
Okay. So this question is a question for folks who are doing the survey for the first time but have attended other meetings. Since you've attended an earlier Healing Communities Study CAB meeting where we did not ask you about the cost of attending, we'd like to do that now. Did you attend the HCS CAB meeting that took place on, and it'll be like June 27th or something, June 28th for Ohio? And they'll say, yes, I attended that meeting. And then we'll say, did you attend the meeting that took place, and that will be an August meeting that happened in Ohio? And we can say, yes, I attended that too. Did you incur any costs to attend the HCS CAB meeting that took place in August? So we're going to start with the most recent meeting. And we want to know if these costs were different from the costs that they reported to attend today's meeting. So we're trying to build in, out of respect for respondent burden, we're just trying to identify the differences in the costs among meetings. But if they did the same exact thing where they, just drove to the meeting and parked in the parking garage and paid $4, then they would say, no, those aren't different costs. So then we ask retrospectively about the time they spent on CE activities beyond the HCS CAB meeting time. These questions also ask about the time spent by non-CAB members that helped with the activities. Between the meeting you attended in June and August, how many total hours did you spend on community engagement activities? Please do not include time spent in the CAB meeting itself. So these are the same questions, but the reference period is different. So here we're asking about what happened between the anchor points of the two previous meetings that they have attended. And then we're once again asking how many people they worked with on their activities, how many total hours the individuals spent on the activities, and the occupations of the individuals. And then we want to ask if they incurred any costs to attend the June meeting. And you may be noticing a pattern here. So if they say yes, were the costs different? Yes, they were different. What costs did you incur? That time I had to stay overnight. So how much did you spend on a hotel room? And then that is the last question for that attendee. And you'll see that, if the costs weren't different, then we don't need to know the details. And if there's more costs, then we have more questions. So it kind of follows the same logic that we've seen previously. So your decision about whether to add an additional attendee or just submit depends on a couple of things. So let's say you're at the meeting in person and you have announced your intentions to interview everyone at the meeting. People are kind of milling around after the meeting, waiting for you, and you know that you're going to have the ability to sit down with someone after you finish with this attendee, then you would just add another attendee. Alternatively, if no one else is left and everyone has gone home, you would just hit submit. If you are on the phone and you have a list of people to call and there's someone else on that list that you're planning to call right now, you can either add an attendee or you can add an attendee from this line here. Once you X out of the survey instrument altogether and you redirect yourself to the link, you're going to start from the beginning, and you're going to have to enter the details about who you are and what the meeting details are that you're talking about. So for instance, the date of the meeting, etc. So is that a helpful illustration of the flow of the data collection and when you will need to add attendees versus just submitting?
It made sense to me.
Thanks, Arnie. Anybody else?
I guess, Patty, so you're saying at this point here, if we add an additional attendee, then again, we go back to adding more of that meeting detail back in again. Is that right?
Right. So if we add an attendee here, we're still working under the umbrella of the meeting details that we filled out at the beginning.
Right.
And we can always add this, and if, we call someone and they're not home, or, we call someone and they say it's a bad time, then you can just close it. All right, so how about you guys who are going to be actually using this? Kristen, Wilson, Drew, anybody?
Hi, this is Kristen. It makes sense to me. I just had a quick question, and you might be getting to this, but I think there were some additional questions about costing the meeting space and that kind of stuff. Where do those questions come up?
Yes, good point. So for now, we have deferred those questions. So we aren't collecting them at this point. But I think maybe Arnie can talk about the plans to add them later.
I'm actually a little surprised by that. Those were part of this survey, right?
No. So that's great that we're all here. So that's a different survey. Ask me about that. We want that survey, key informant, that is going to be separate from the people at the CAB meeting. Okay, so
yeah, it's a different respondent. That's right.
Right.
But it should be programmed and ready for this meeting, I thought.
Well, okay, I don't think it is, because again, it's not. So let's back up to higher level. The people that we're interviewing here are the CAB members themselves, and so we're focusing on the meeting and getting the time for those people. I think the next phase is we need to identify, and I think that's another bit of training on another day, to train people on identifying back to the CAB administrator who can answer questions about the meeting space itself. The CAB members themselves would not know that information. So we focus this initial round on identifying those people, and then we'll come back around later, follow up and get the information on the CAB, on the CAB meeting space, etc., from the key informant. And that key informant may be the CAB administrator. So, Arnie, is that ringing a bell on what we've talked about earlier?
It does. It's certainly one we don't have to ask the first meeting because it can be somewhat retrospective. So I guess, yeah, it makes sense to do a separate training on it as soon as it's in place.
Kristen, does that help make it clear?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Oh, one thing again, just as a, I'm not sure, am I creating that noise? I hope not. Can y'all hear me?
Sort of. Oh, that's better.
Yeah, it's better. So one thing that strikes me just hearing about, again, one of the concerns just in practicalities, we don't have IRB approval yet. And even if we do get IRB approval in the next day or so, it sounds like from what Stephen's saying, we send this program out to the research site, and then they have to load it into their system. And then each research site has to basically use some variant of the RTI model on their own system. Is that right? Do I have that right, Stephen or Patty?
Yes.
And so, right, so that takes probably some time for that to happen. So there's a CAB meeting at Kentucky, 8 a.m. Friday morning, right? So I guess as a practical matter, I don't think this is going to be ready to go for that meeting to actually implement online, right? So can we, or should we be doing this in hard copy? Or should we treat this as another missed or previous survey? So I guess I'm posing it to maybe a combination of Arnie, Stephen, and Patty. What do we do as a practical matter if we, again, first of all, I want to make it clear, we have to have IRB approval, which we do not have yet. So even if we, so the point is, if we get IRB approval between now and Friday morning, is there some, what would be a backup plan? Or do we just, or we don't have a backup plan? We just don't really, we'll say we'll get it the next meeting. What should we do in that case? Hard copy is one option, or what's another option?
Well, one of the questions that I'm thinking about is, I'm not totally aware of the kinds of conversations that you guys have been having with the CAB. So does the Kentucky CAB that's meeting on Friday know about us and know that at some point we intended to attend their meeting?
I don't know, Kentucky people, what do you think? What do you know?
Well, I'll just say that that this will be introduced at the meeting, and there'll be a brief description on what the economic analysis is about. So they'll at least know that it's coming. This is sort of where we are working on a backup plan, because we also see the days ticking away. So I haven't talked with Josh or Drew about the option of doing hard copy, handwritten data collection. I don't know to what extent that would be possible. But we're sort of planning, I mean, once the IRB is approved and everything is programmed, couldn't we send it, even if it's not the day of the meeting, but we let them know it's coming and that we will follow up with them to fill it out over the phone? That's kind of the plan we've been working with. So wouldn't have to wait for the next CAB meeting. We could do it as soon as everything is programmed and approved. Start calling them. What do you think? And Josh and Drew and other thoughts?
Josh, Drew, any other comments?
I think that is my understanding as well, that if we weren't able to do it at the meeting, that we would follow up with them as soon as we got IRB approval, that we wouldn't wait till the next meeting. We would just call them and ask the same questions. And Catherine is right. We are on the agenda at the meeting for them to say who we are and what we'll be doing.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, okay.
Do you have a way, Josh, to find out who attended the meeting?
Oh,
yes,
like
we'll have a roster.
Right.
And we actually have more information. We, as part of their coalition process, we have bios for everybody. So we actually already have some of the information about how to get a hold of them.
Okay. And you'll have the information that differentiates the invitees from the attendees?
Yeah, we'll have an attendee.
I can't say, I don't know the answer to that.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes. Yes. Everyone who attends will sign an attendee list.
Okay, great.
And we'll also know if there's if someone is not able to attend and they send a proxy or a representative. I saw that from the first meeting.
Great.
How does that work then? Do we want to interview those proxies?
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Another kind of global question to folks outside of Kentucky. I think there are other meetings in September coming up, and I wonder whether the other states have contacted the IRB administrator, the CAB administrator, make sure they're on the agenda. Do kind of what Catherine's suggesting, minimally introduce yourself, say that this is what we're going to try to do, and hopefully get IRB approval for those other meetings. I'm wondering if other states have actually are on the agenda for those meetings. Ohio or New York or others?
Yeah, this is Kristen. We've been talking with our community engagement team that facilitates the CAB meeting, and we've been talking with them about participating in the meeting.
Great. How about New York?
Joey, are you able to tell us about New York?
Are you on mute, Joey? Or Laura? Or how about Massachusetts?
Yeah, we're also on the agenda for the first CAB meeting, or the next CAB meeting on the 11th. So we'll do a brief introduction, very similar to Kentucky, and then go from there.
Is that September 11th?
Yes, it is, and it's a phone call meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds like we're going to have to follow up, Arnie. We'll have to follow up with New York. They're get on the agenda.
Yep.
Okay, so I think we have a good plan for if we don't get it, to go have the introduction, and others agree. I think the Kentucky plan is a good one to follow up by phone afterwards.
Agreed. I think that that's a good idea. Following our pilot test working group yesterday, Gary, I asked if we could ask the IRB to expedite Kentucky's site application and the protocols for this instrument. But I know it's a short week, so, you know, we can remain hopeful. And of course, we'll communicate any developments with the IRB approval that we receive. But it could be that, you know, we won't be having the clearances that we need till next week, so that Kentucky would do a retrospective with respondents on the telephone about Friday's meeting.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I just don't know how long it's going to take for the sites to take our REDCap version, their version, or whatever onto their system. That's very quick. Josh has some that I just don't know. The other thing, of course, Patty, they have to do is check on this consent form and make sure that the one that went in, that we have the right one here, because as I said, the one that says that we're not going to have their name, but we're actually identifying them throughout. It's like an inconsistency. Maybe it slipped through the cracks or something.
Yes, I made a note about that. Okay.
Back to you, Patty. Go on. I'm sorry for.
No, I think this is all definitely in the spirit of the agenda. So I'm thinking, Melissa, I think that the last slide that I had was just about next steps, which included the Kentucky meeting on Friday, the IRB. And then, Arnie, should we talk at all about kind of next steps that are further down the road? So we have these meetings for the CAB, then are there next steps that are part of the intervention protocol with like the community coalitions and other types of audiences? I'm not as clear on that, so.
There is the community coalition ones, though. They're going to be, you know, potentially 8 separate communities in each state, and it may not be necessarily the individuals that are on this call right now with us that are doing it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So are folks, would it be helpful for folks if we provided a link to this instrument that RTI is hosting for you to run through on your own and look at the questions and get a sense of the various paths through the instrument that depend on different answers? Or would you rather just wait till it's hosted at your site? Or, you know, how can we help you prepare for your work?
Yeah, I think, this is Kristen, I think it would be helpful to Ohio if you could share a link, because then we can kind of show folks how it's going to work in practice.
Sure, we can certainly do that.
Thank you.
Kentucky
Just for
agrees.
practice only, so this isn't, you know,
Yep.
just out of an
Absolutely.
abundance of caution, just to say this is not for respondents. So we can do that with everybody. And then to begin with, until we build up and consider the requirements for a data collection system that's going to track respondents, any kind of longitudinal analysis and within respondent analysis will have to rely on linking respondents by their name. But, you know, we hope to be able to kind of develop something as a workaround going forward. I'm just trying to think if there's any other topics to cover, or, you know, are you guys feeling comfortable with the format and the layout of the questionnaire? I'm happy to follow your lead or go through it again if you would think that that would be helpful. Okay.
Yep.
So as a next step, I kept a couple of notes just about the questionnaire that we will look into, including the consent. We will also share a link to the questionnaire with each of you so that you can practice on your own. We will keep everybody informed of the IRB approval. It's possible that the consent form might change a little bit given the feedback and input that we will ultimately receive from the IRB. So, you know, if there's changes to what you've reviewed on your own, that is where those are coming from. And then, you know, I think that you guys have probably a good amount of resources if there's any questions. If folks who conduct the survey from Kentucky with the attendees of Friday's meetings, if you guys have any lessons learned or any feedback, certainly share that with us. We're happy to, you know, learn from each other and think about how we can refine any procedures, especially given that we'll be conducting this survey for, you know, a fair amount of time. And if there's any other sort of, you know, documentation or support that we at the DCC can provide, certainly let us know, and we're, you know, we're happy to react to that.
Great.
Okay. Well, I'm certain that we'll all be able to take advantage of this extra time on our calendars. So given that, I think we can end here, and then we'll be in touch with the next steps that I've discussed.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Patty.
Thanks, Gary. Thank you, Melissa, too. It's really helpful. Oh, hold on. We have some chats. Okay. Catherine signed off. Massachusetts would like to receive the link to the survey. Brenda says thanks. And Josh, what is your question about the checkbox for which one's preferred? What's that pertaining to? Sorry, I missed that one.
No problem. It was when we were asking about their preferred contact methods, and we have both phone and email, but we didn't say which one was the preferred one.
Oh, right. So if they can, I think we're interested in having the license to contact them as many ways as possible. If they only want to be contacted via phone, you can just leave the email field blank. But if we can contact them either way, then, you can fill in both of the fields. Oh, and yes, Josh, we will share the slides along with the link to the instruments. Okay, anything else? All right. Thanks, everyone, for your participation today.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.